Good morning, dear friends and colleagues. Welcome once again back with us, Boni. This is a session on the situation in Latvia. I'm very proud to introduce Professor Solvita Olsena to you, who will guide us through the Latvian status quo in a minute. Solvita is an associate professor in public health and law at the medical faculty of the University of Latvia, which is in Riga. She holds a medical doctor degree, a professional lawyer degree, and a doctor in law degree. She's an attorney at law at the Latvian Council of Sworn Advocates, and she is a member of the European Committee for the Prevention of Torture and Inhuman or Depredating Treatment or Punishment. Elected in respect to Latvia, she's a member of the medical group of the committee. And finally, and not unimportantly, she is a leading health law expert in Latvia with long experience both in academia and in legal practice. Her academic interests and research topics include the right to health and health inequalities, patient rights, patient safety, medical data protection, and eHealth. And the last 2 points, medical data protection and eHealth, are those where our interests are very close. And that's one of the reasons why we have been in contact now for many years. I'm very proud to have her here, in particular because the title of the project she is most intensely involved in recently is on impact of COVID-19 on the health system and the care system and public health in Latvia, ways in preparing health sector for future epidemics. Solvita, I'm really happy to have you here with us. Perhaps we start with this project. What exactly is it about and what are the main findings so far?
Very nice to meet you, Nicholas, and hello to everyone who is listening either today or will listen us in future. So I'm really happy to be here and to discuss both health law issues in COVID times and my activities in Riga, and as well, of course, my present research project where I'm a small part of, which is we are now doing research on evaluating what was impact of COVID-19 on healthcare system in Latvia since March. And as well, we are now going to develop recommendations. This is the first task, to develop recommendations for future activities necessary to control pandemics or necessary to provide healthcare in pandemics. So means Latvian government announced 5 million grants for research projects in Latvia. So the proposal was divided in 10 parts, and our part is public health, and it is a fifth part of the project, and there are other projects as well now going on in Latvia dealing with infectious disease issues of COVID, with society response, with economic response, with digitalization in general, and digitalization in education, and so on. So actually, there are now big groups of scientists in Latvia doing research on particularly on COVID issues. What is very challenging is this project. This research is meant to be done in 6 months, and that's, as you know, for researchers is a really short time, and then therefore we really have to choose methodology which is possible to be done in so short time. But for me, I'm doing legal part, I'm doing human rights part in this, so I'm quite well in this, because legal part we can do. It's a lot of research in doctrinal research. It's a lot. Okay, some case studies we will do, and so and I'm really sure we will produce our results. So, but I already, when we started the project, and it was early July, I did my own research already before that. So I did legal research already since April. And then as an attorney, I had some already few clients who really were questioning their rights in COVID times.
Yes.
So I'm in legal research and legal practice, particularly in COVID since really early March when all this started in Latvia.
Yeah, could we perhaps just to wrap up the situation briefly? I'm not really deeply familiar with every detail in Latvia, obviously. Could we briefly wrap up the situation since March? So I assume that there was a lockdown like in many other countries. How rigid was the lockdown? When was it lifted? And how is the situation when it comes to human rights at the moment?
So yes, in March 12th, the country decided and issued a law declaring emergency state and declaring lockdown, as all our neighboring countries. We had closed borders. We had a lot of restrictions. However, in Latvia, we had really, how to say, easy situation in respect to numbers of COVID infectious patients and COVID deaths and so on. So, like today, we have at the moment we have one of the lowest rates of COVID infections is so-called cumulative number of in 14 days, and it is 3.8, and this is very low compared to all European countries. And today data, and later we'll talk about COVID app, and we have a COVID app where I can get general data on it. So today we have 10 new diagnosed patients, and we have 0 deaths, and we have 2,226 tests done since previous report. So then we by using this app or by using other of course statistical data, we know that we had only 1,300 patients in Latvia altogether.
1,300.
So we are really doing well.
Mm-hmm.
There are of course some legal issues, of course, but mainly it's because of our society, how we live. We have very low density.
Mm-hmm.
We are quite much able to comply with regulations, and as well, we were happy that we didn't have these super spread events.
Mm-hmm. So there was a lockdown on the 12th of March, and that was lifted when?
It was lifted on 9th of June.
9th of June. So 2.5 months of lockdown, which is quite long, right? And
it was quite long, but it was gradually reduced during April and May.
Yeah.
So this emergency state was declared for all this period, but different reductions already in societal activities, let's say restaurants and healthcare services, particularly I was investigating that on, and they were gradually already leased during the April and May. So, and then also we had in April we had only particular repatriation like flights, especially organized flights, but already in May the country opened already some air traffic.
So you are more or less back to normal now.
We are quite much back to normal now, but it's summer, and summer in Latvia means we are all a lot of us we are on holidays. Like schools are on holidays, universities are on holidays, and the different events are on holidays. Of course, we are really missing our cultural events, which Latvia was very rich. In summers, we had a lot. So, but now we are having variations of open air cultural events, or now even in closed premises, we have some events with particular restrictions. So I was in one last Sunday. So yes, that is the cultural life in general is really still very limited. Mm-hmm. But kindergartens, all shops are open. We have quite much abilities to travel, even though, but of course, the travel is restricted towards countries which are in so-called red list. Mm-hmm. So, and I had a friend last week, and he's his flight to Eindhoven was cancelled due to the changing epidemiological situation. So,
in the Netherlands. Mm-hmm.
yeah,
I see.
But in general, we are having very good life.
Yes, I see. And when it comes to the university life, I mean, how is the situation in autumn as you see it at the moment? Will there be, will students be back on campus, or will you try to do some remote teaching or only remote teaching, or you don't know yet?
That's a very good question. Thank you for that. At this moment, we have to keep in mind that universities are mainly regulated by national law, and universities they have to comply with national law and with accredited programs and so on. And we didn't solve the issue. How do we comply with program requirements where it is clearly stated that is teaching in person? Of course, in March, April, May, June, our University of Latvia went directly to online teaching. Mm-hmm. And we really did from one day to another, we changed the mode. And we had, of course, some difficulties, not me particularly, for me it was quite easy, but other colleagues, they had some challenges. But at the present situation, and yesterday I discussed the issue with administration of university. So the situation is so that there is no general permission of the university to adjust our programs accordingly. We mm-hmm. have to comply with our programs. So there are some recommendations in respect to epidemiological safety. So distancing, physical distancing, hand washing, and so on. But at this moment, what the university has approached that we will start with teaching in campus. Yes, there are some adjustments. Students will be grouped, and they will have studies with the same group in the same room. Mm-hmm. And of course, we will be asked to keep 2 meters distance. We will be asked to look at signs of respiratory infections. We will restrict entrance to university buildings only to those either staff or students, and so on. And we have a person in university dedicated to deal with all epidemiological safety issues in respect to students and the staff, and so on. So we are, but at the moment we are planning to start in person. There will be, of course, exceptions in respect to our foreign students, and especially those who will be required to comply with self-isolation rules. Mm-hmm. They will have individual plan for online mm-hmm. learning, teaching, and as soon as they will be able to return back to school, they will join. But of course, that's opinion today. And what I believe in the case our situation will epidemiological situation, if I hope not, but in the case there will be need to restrict this approach. Of course, I believe that our government will then advise university how to do. But what we experienced in spring semester. There was really very little advice from the government how to do, and my medical students, where it was clearly stated that no any kind of internship or practical learning can be performed in hospitals mm-hmm. or exams in hospitals and so on. And of course, 6 years medical students, they were really worried how they are going to complete their final exams. And they were even sending a request to the government and suggesting that the government should agree and sit together with them to find a good ways. And the government was not so responsive to the proposal of students. But they completed their of course 6 year and or other studies. But if and of course, this virus is not disappearing immediately. If there will be challenges in medical studies, particularly, then we are discussing what would be the best way to continue learning teaching.
Yeah, may I ask you as a public health expert and as a medical expert whether you think that the measures that you described, so 2-meter distance and putting students in groups and looking for symptoms, suffice to keep this under control?
Of course, university is not it doesn't exist outside society. And of course, if student is taking public transport and is getting infected there, then we could have brilliant measures in university, but that will not help us. So and there is one issue I'm really surprised that our government is not taking seriously. It's the issue about wearing regular face coverings.
Mm-hmm.
And I really believe, and I also discussed with my colleagues in university, there are also colleagues, they do believe that requirement to wear face coverings is really efficient tool to limit spread of virus, but it is still not required in Latvia. And it was introduced as a requirement in May in respect to public transport.
Mm-hmm.
People were not so ready to do it, and they were not also equipped with that, and they didn't comply with that. And then this requirement was lifted in June. But of course, and then it was, and I was really surprised in that moment, because when the government introduced this requirement in public transport, I even wrote on Twitter to Minister of Health, I do not see the scientific background for such requirement in public transport separately, because this virus is spreading everywhere. There are a lot of people. Why don't you have this requirement in shops or in some other quite dense public spaces? And then she responded, and there were others who responded in May that there is no scientific evidence. Mm-hmm. And then of course I really tried to introduce colleagues, other public and the government, the Ministry of Health, with evidence which was already there in that time, published in British Medical Journal by Professor Tishkinhal and other scientists. And but still, and today is August, this issue about efficiency of face coverings to control spread of viruses still under the question.
Yes.
So this is one of my this is serious concern. But of course, what I see, if the virus is not circulating in society, of course it doesn't have a trail to come to university. But as soon as virus will circulate in society in much bigger extent than it is now, mm-hmm. then of course the university will be required to change the approach.
Yeah, but your expectation at the moment would be that if things stay stable and if face masks are worn and all the other measures are taken, you think that it is acceptable to take the risk as an expert. I mean, to ask students to come back.
At this moment, at this rate of spread of virus in Latvia, which is very low, I believe yes. Because I'm looking for systematic approach, because people should get education. They should get education, which is quality one. People should get healthcare. They have different other needs. And if we are able to control virus as at the present moment, I don't think that the risk is too high to limit all other needs. Mm-hmm. But of course, as soon as we will see, and I hope that will not come to Latvia, different risk in caused by that virus. Of course, then we should again rethink what kind of activities are high risk activities and what kind of activities are low risk activities. Because what is as well my concern, that when we saw in March, when all the restrictions were placed, there was no evaluation in respect to whether that activity is high risk or low risk activity. Like, for example, government really closed down more or less all ambulatory healthcare services without evaluation whether that healthcare service is, what kind of risk does that healthcare service contains. And I have been investigating one example. For example, a consultancy psychotherapies. That the medical doctor, psychotherapist, or but that's mainly for medical doctors. It was not even for psychologists. But medical doctors were prohibited to provide psychotherapy consultancies in person, and that was clearly for no evaluation, because a medical doctor, psychotherapist, doesn't have any physical contact to his patient. He has a really 5 or 6 meter distance. And there was a really high need of these services, because I do work with the Association of Medical Doctors in Psychotherapy, and they really see the really high need still continuing. And that, of course, was not a proper approach to say that the doctors are prohibited to provide that service for patients in need. So what I say that the knowledge what we have today, and I'm happy, of course, today we have much more scientific knowledge in how do we control virus. We simply have to put our knowledge together and to see what kind of societal activities, education, healthcare, economic activities, what kind of epidemiological risks are there.
Yeah. So may I ask you a question that I'm thinking about a lot, and I don't expect an answer, but perhaps you have one. I would really appreciate one. My question is the following: when until March, all of us were completely used to live in a world where epidemiological measures did not really play a role in our life, how we would develop our life. So it was in this sense free, right? So every one of us could do whatever we wanted. Since March, all kinds of public health thoughts come into our life via legal means. And behind these measures that come with legal means, there are values, such as the ones that you mentioned here, which is society cannot stop, and people need to have the possibility to do their living as much as their daily life as much as possible, and so on and so on. And all these values make it through into law in a given way, right? And all these laws then are obvious, need to be constitutional, right? So they need to be in line with fundamental rights. And I would assume that it would take us a lot of time to find the right balance here, because it has taken us a lot of time in many of these conflicting areas to find the right, whatever that might be, balance. And what I see at the moment in Europe everywhere is that all of us come into this debate with our own set of priorities, and we then say, I don't know, life is not priority number one, provided that it would mean, or personal life is not priority number one, provided that it would mean a complete stop of society, or psychotherapy is not important enough, provided that it increases the risk of spreading the disease, and therefore we stop psychotherapy, right? And so on. And there are plenty of such measures. Every one of us is confronted with this every day. And my question now is, who should govern this, or who should steer this? And what exactly is the role of legal or medical experts in this debate? And where does the law end and the political decision start?
Thank you, Nicholas, for this wonderful question. My short answer is we have to govern that. We have these same people living here, and we have to govern that. But and that question, I really love this issue, because this is what all my life I was doing a lot. And what I could say from my perspective, that of course these public health risks, they were always there. but we were not aware of them. We were not ready to discuss them. We somehow, there was a lot of times when I left these public health experts or public health professionals let them do and so on. But because like HIV, TB, hepatitis C, and many other diseases, we have been living with them. They were really causing a lot of harm to us and our society, our friends, colleagues, and so on. But we took it for a very long time. We took it as a personal problem. We didn't look at this as a societal issue or as a group issue. Now, and I'm really, I will not say happy, but I say this is fascinating that COVID came and opened our eyes, that there are so many biological factors, and in this case with a virus, which are really, if we do not care about them, and if we do not act properly, that all these viruses, they are killing us and they are endangering us. And it was necessary in Europe, and particularly to show examples that people are suffering so much in big numbers or dying in big numbers, like let's say example of Italy, to open our eyes that diseases are spreading, viruses are spreading, and we are vulnerable, all of us, and then we really have to use, and here it's what I say, we should govern, and governing, I mean, we have to use our knowledge to evaluate what kind of life we are living. And there are a lot of, because in Europe and many of in our societies, we were really, like you said, we were feeling that we are living very freely, we can do whatever we want. Yeah. And of course, it was not really the case, because we were all exposed to traffic risks, to, like in Latvia, to drowning risks and different other risks. But that we were considering that this is a problem of individual. And from a public health like perspective, I would say that COVID pressed us to learn. And I really, and here I see the positive issue of COVID, that this pressure is really chance to learn, and what I would really wish that and why I do also this study is that these lessons we learned could really then be useful for future.
Yeah, let's come to the future in a second. But before that, a little bit of the past still, because I remember very well, I was already old enough then, when HIV entered our lives, right? And HIV at the beginning was in some ways very similar to what we see here, but in the at least in the public perception. So it was a pandemic and a new disease and the virus, and nobody knew anything about it. The difference was, although people were very upset about the situation, never, ever, at least to my knowledge or my memory, never, ever there was any state in the world making any compulsory rules how people would need to behave to decrease the probability that they would be infected, right? It was an individual problem. There were many recommendations, right? You should not reuse a needle, you should not have unprotected intercourse and so on, but it was an individual choice whether or not to follow these rules to protect yourself. This is very different in this case, because in this case it came with a lot of rules from the very beginning that had a direct impact on you, although you were not yet infected. That is, in my view, a difference, and I don't know yet where this comes from. And the second point, let's come now to the teaching situation. If you had a student today in Latvia or in Austria arguing that he or she has a personal set of priorities and reducing the risk for his or her own life is priority number one, and therefore that person is not willing to come to the university but prefers to stay at home and still wants to study, this individual choice is again excluded in a way, right? So it's no option if the description that you gave about what you are planning to do in October is if I understood that correctly, then the student will not be able to study. So again, this is something where the society already has now all kinds of sets of decisions taken without any process in it, right? And that this is also different. That was not the case in HIV, I think, right? So there were much more time to discuss and to come up with some kind of consensus within the society. So I think this is really new. Would you agree?
Yes, of course, I agree that this is a new situation, and but as you know from humanitarian law, we say that there is no war repeating. This is the same with diseases.
Yeah,
they
true.
do not repeat the same scenarios, and therefore this COVID is not repeating previous diseases. However, when you look at, and particularly also history of medical law, we do see a lot of restrictive measures without proper evaluation of individual freedoms. Because when I lived in Soviet Union, we had a law stating that person who was diagnosed with sexual transmitted disease was obliged to disclose all his contacts, and all these contact persons were obliged to undergo diagnostics.
Mm-hmm.
And that was also compulsory measure. You were taken to an institution dealing with sexual transmitted diseases by police. We had such cases. So, and then another example, when you look at people who are suffering from mental diseases, they are smaller groups simply, but there is a long history. Just because the person was suffering mental disease, they were very restricted by law as well. Their rights, their possibilities, and so on, and of course, but that didn't come so quickly. Now, COVID came immediately, but COVID came with a different issue, which was really necessary to open eyes, because it came with a big numbers of fast dying people. And that made difference, in my opinion. And therefore, governments, and I really remember I was in Council of Europe in early March, and we really, with the HBO colleagues and our committee, we discussed with medical members what to do, because this was a week before lockdowns. And we saw that there was, because of this high number of dying people or suffering very seriously, and healthcare system crashing in Italy, there was a really big pressure on politicians to do something. People were really requesting at that time, please do something, please go sharp, please go very restrictive. And the politicians did so.
Yes.
And in my opinion, they even did what was demanded from the society. Because that's what I also observed in Latvia. There was so much outcries why they don't do this or that. So this made difference. Biological part made difference, because the consequences were obvious for everyone that this is like dangerous. And actually, it made a lot of fear. Why people were so good at complying with all these restrictions, because they were afraid.
Yes. But this fear, the fear certainly did not come out of the blue, right? So it was part of the PR, if I would call it.
As well, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. But that was it. And I would really love, and it's most likely colleagues in anthropology or ethnography could study the societal reactions in that time. But that's what I could see and observe in early March, that there was so big pressure on everyone, please do something.
Yes.
And governments did. But when we come back to your second question about whether the student should be granted his individual rights to study at home, in my opinion, unfortunately not, because we have to really acknowledge that individual rights, they can be expressed well and exercised well only in this systematic approach. So we have to acknowledge that we do live in society, we do live in different groups, and therefore we are able to also to exercise our rights within the context of that group we are living in. And if, for example, because education is not regulated on individual manner, like I was telling, if our program in our university is clearly accredited and stated that it should be provided in a person, and if the government doesn't permit university to change teaching mode, then the university and the student, they are like trapped in. And of course, then the university as well as a institution who has to comply with existing law doesn't have autonomous power to say, no, we will rule out this issue in a different way. And then a university can say, of course, technically, we would be able to provide you that way of teaching, but legally, we are not permitted to do so. And this is what we see in many instances. That and the COVID actually allowed us to really see so many of these issues when legally we have one way to go, technically we have another way to go, and biologically, looking at the public health issues, there is maybe third way to go.
And
this is where we need knowledge to because what is necessary, we have to combine all these three ways together, and we have to find a solution which at our present knowledge seems reasonable for achieving our aim.
Yeah, but if I understood you correctly, now you would say that the player who finally needs to find this out balance is to be the government or the legislator, or the people in power. Let's put it like this, right? Because I mean, as if I see the situation as follows. It's rather unclear at the moment whether or not. No, let's put it like this: the risk to be infected is obviously higher when you go to university than when you stay at home. It's a potentially deadly disease also for young people. So there are very good reasons to try to avoid this, either for yourself or for your family. There is plenty of teaching and plenty of teaching available, technically speaking, that would substitute a lot of the present style we normally teach in at universities. And still you say, if the law is not changed, my student would not have the right to insist to stay at home, right? So at the end, the balance that you try to find is found by the legislator in this case, right? Because the legislator could only also change the rule by saying, we do everything from home now, as we did it in March, April, and May. And I mean, the world didn't stop, right? So
exactly.
Yeah.
Now, this is what I see, that it's not only legislator. You'll see the COVID actually really as well presented us clearly how we are interdependent. The legislator and lawyers, they should really be, they should listen to scientists in epidemiology, and then they should listen also to, say, people who are organizing educational processes in university, and they have to, all of them sit around the table, and they have to, all of them discuss what would be the most suitable approach with the lowest risk to achieve our aim.
Yeah, that's a good.
Because a long time ago, we really thought, okay, government could do this, and it's not so important how well it is based on science or not. But the COVID really pressed us to see that knowledge in virusology is crucial to issue the law. And therefore, and here I see, I have been working in this interdisciplinary field more than 20 years. And I have participated in so many really hard discussions that the lawyers say, no, we don't see these individual rights, and some do say, yeah, this is only one medical study, and so on and so on. And then they either don't get anywhere, or they put some restrictions or some permissions which are unreasonable. So now, but since there were not so many dying because of these restrictions, we could live with them. But today, COVID is different virus, and it is really pressing us to find solutions which are really limiting the risks of virus. But this is really how to say. We have to acknowledge that we are living in the risky world. We are living, our life is risky way, and this is natural. But of course, we have to be very much open about different risk factors we are facing when we are doing one thing or another thing.
Yes.
Driving by car to university, going by foot to university, or whatever. And then, of course, we have to then be open about all these risks. We have to then do these evaluations, and then we have to then make our choices. But choices, it makes also, that requires responsibility. And what do I see today in Latvia and also in Europe? That and thanks God, our lives in Second World War was not so demanding in respect to responsibility. We had long time, we could distribute discussion, we could say for small responsibilities there, for small responsibility here, and another small responsibilities there. Today, when the decisions should be taken very timely, and of course then the responsibility comes with that, the people are quite afraid to do mistakes and to take wrong decisions. And this is a really challenging situation. But what is and I see how to say and this I saw as well that and there are a lot of good scientists also saying, of course, COVID pandemic really is pushing us to take fast decisions we can take only based on the knowledge we have today. It might happen that this knowledge we have today will be outdated in 1 week. Yeah. Meaning that this decision we took today, we have to change 1 week later. So dynamics today, this very different one. But there are not so many people, as I say in Latvia, not only, also in other countries, who are able to work in this dynamic approach. Because what happened to WHO actually, when there were 239 scientists who had to send a letter to WHO saying that their recommendations are outdated from scientific perspective, please change that. And that was particularly regarding the masks. This was and later on when I saw in an article in New York Times, it was clearly described that there is a panel of persons and scientists sitting, and there were part of the panel, they were quite progressive and able to take this dynamic, and there were people who were not so good at this, the dynamic approach. And therefore, there was a kind of break in that machine, and this, from human perspective, of course, is very normal. We are not living in the same dynamics, all of us. Yeah. And now it is, of course, and we see today constantly. We had yesterday a government press conference where the Minister of Health was having one opinion about what is scientifically well-based way to public gatherings, and our Prime Minister, who is also very, he has PhD, and so he had another opinion. And so it's a, but that's what I like in this time, and I see this is really challenging, that that time and decisions, they really require dynamics, and also these decisions are really like opening up that whatever you do, you have to bear your responsibility.
Yeah. I mean, just one more point on this. I mean, it's obviously important to have experts helping then in this. The question is, who is the right expert and who is the right group of experts, right? So it's, I mean, one of the lessons I learned so far out of this is that the question who is going to advise the government and what is the background of those people is of utmost importance, because it then supports them to take the responsibility that you're talking about. But it could be different if there were other experts. So in particular, the ones that you mentioned, psychotherapists, for example, at least in the countries where I have a closer look into, were not really on the top list of experts at the beginning, right? And it might have been wise to ask them a little bit more intensely at the beginning before spreading the fear on the continent, right? As it happened in March. And also lawyers, and in particular, lawyers with a specific interest in fundamental rights were not really on the priority list when it came to the measures in March.
Here I have a small note, Nicholas.
Yeah, go
ahead. Latvia was in very particular situation in this respect. Our present president, Mr. Egils Levits, is a former judge of European Court of Human Rights and a former judge of Court of Justice. And he, very early, I think it was around 20th March, something like that, he called so-called the chairman of Supreme Court, the president of Constitutional Court, who is also a former judge of European Court of Human Rights, and him, and they made like small council. And already at the end of March, they both our president and the president of Constitutional Court, they wrote particularly 2 articles in our law journal, Jurista Vārds, stating that fundamental rights are basic rights which cannot be lifted in general, even in times of emergencies.
So that's interesting. I have been
even quoting all these really excellent scholars and at present they are like president of the country and president of the Constitutional Court. I have been quoting even them and in my article, and I will do these quotes that these limits should be well based, and they particularly pointed out in science.
Oh, that's very interesting, because this is then different in Latvia from many other countries. Yeah. So 2 questions coming out of this. The first one is, did it have any impact? So is there anything that is not allowed in any of the measures that we know that are not allowed in Latvia because of fundamental rights concerns? And in particular, what is the impact of this on the tracing app solution that is used in Latvia at the moment?
Look, I will start with a tracing app. Latvia was one of the first countries who developed an app and introduced an app. And this issue of fundamental rights was really explored and discussed. Our director of our data protection institution expressed her opinion on it. And there were some other lawyers, Ministry of Justice expressed their opinion on it. And they were also describing how that app is operating in order to safeguard fundamental rights. And then later on, this app was also checked by the office of the president. And actually, our president was one of the first public persons who downloaded the app on TV show, not show, but in TV news, and it invited everyone to use that app. And even he announced that this app is good to serve the purpose, and it is safe in respect to fundamental rights. And later on, I followed the technical experts. They as well, they wrote that they checked that because the particular algorithm which is on app, that this is exactly doing what is promised to do.
Yeah.
So I am not so much I didn't do my own research in detail in this respect, because there were so many good and really experts in this field already involved. But our app, which the titled "Up to the COVID" in Latvian and "Stop COVID," has had a very nice approach. They had one weakness. It was not well advertised in from the lens of human rights. And they did publish this open code quite late. But in general, in general, it was done really nice way, and it was done through the people who are really experts in fundamental rights.
Yeah, but it's only on a voluntary basis, so there is no obligation to use it.
Yes, and of course, this is only on voluntary basis. Now there is a discussion, and that, for example, for people who are attending cultural events, that they may be required to use an app.
Yeah, which is one of the standard problems. The next one will be whether an employer may ask his employees to use the app, right? So that will be the next issue then.
It is the next issue, but the point is so that the app is not anywhere. These data, they are not available for employers.
No, but if you introduce an app and you say that it's voluntary, and at the same time it's legal for employers to ask employees to use the app if they want to enter the office, then it's probably no longer voluntary, right? So
definitely, definitely, then it is not anymore. That is not anymore voluntary. But let's see how that will develop, because since the introduction of the app, we had really already low rates of infectious of spread of COVID, and now there was news that either one case or two cases were traced via app.
So very small.
So it's not really, we don't have evidence whether really how well or that app is really working in tracing COVID contacts.
Yes, I see. So the other question, just not to forget it, was whether you think that the fact that fundamental rights were very early discussed in Latvia had any impact on the regulatory framework in comparison with other states. So is there anything you are not using that other states are using because of these fundamental rights perspectives?
Look, from the formal perspective, it had a really good impact, because when the emergency state ended, now we have, and I will now open in my computer. So now the COVID issues are regulated by two laws. And as well, because we had a discussion, of course, legally, who has authority to issue legal regulations in respect to fundamental rights restrictions. Because initially it was done by the Cabinet of Ministers, but in Latvian constitutional law, it's Cabinet of Ministers doesn't have a full lawmaking power. It has just a power through delegation. So and that was, of course, one issue of fundamental rights, and therefore it was even quite early the important regulations or restrictions, they went through the parliament. We have another issue. Please, we could come back. Latvia introduced e-parliament because of COVID. Our parliament is now able to work online.
Yeah, and will this continue now? Is this?
Yeah, and so at the moment we have law on the management of the spread of COVID infection, and if you see the chapter, there is the introductory chapter, general provisions, and the second chapter, restrictions of the rights of persons. So it's clear statement that. And it says in accordance with this law, restrictions of the rights of private individuals may be imposed only when the risk to public safety that are related to the spread of COVID infection cannot be effectively eliminated by applying the legal means specified under the general legal procedures. So we have and that is, of course, a real outcome of that pressure. When we do come more in detail in what manner the state do restrict rights of individual persons. So I did research yesterday on one particular issue. How do we require persons to stay in self-isolation? And that self-isolation is regulated by the regulations of cabinets, and these norms are not. First of all, they are not clear. The norm stating the self-regulation is really, by the text written in Latvian, it provides a retroactive application, which is strange. And then until yesterday, it didn't stay when this list of countries is entering in force. And it was really people and even clients, they were consulting me, asking, but when this particular list, which is published Friday 16:30, when it has a legal force, and it was not stated. And
there's no general rule.
Was discussed, corrected yesterday with amendments in that regulation, but this mistaken text of the norm, that is not yet corrected. So, but there is, of course, another issue. What I would like to say, it was stated by the president and by the president of Constitutional Court that all these restrictions should be well based in science. And this, what I did my own research, and this I would say that this criterion is not fulfilled. We have so little references to whatever science they are using to pose these restrictions. I had a client early in April, May, and she was really put under police control because she was a COVID patient in March, and she didn't have any symptoms since end of March, but she had the positive tests, which is scientifically stated that these tests could be well positive long time after the person is not anymore symptomatic or able to infect someone. And it was scientifically well known that the test itself is not enough proper one to state whether a person is already recovered from COVID or not. And we had really quite long cooperation period, and she really discussed with public authorities on what legal basis they do request for this police control and quarantine. And at the end of that, this rule was lifted, and the Ministry of Health issued the statement that based of novel scientific evidence, this rule has been changed. And there was no any reference to any novel scientific evidence.
Yeah.
So this is what I see, that our government and lawmakers, they really consider this mechanism of restriction of human rights. However, I'm still missing reasonable scientific evidence to which I could, for example, myself check whether that evidence is supporting that restriction or not.
Yeah, which brings me back to the question where the political decision starts and where the scientific evidence ends, and where the room in between is the one that the lawyers will have to find in the next years, I think, right? So that is
definitely.
Yeah. When I come back, Solvita, if I may, to the to wrap this up a little bit, to the recommendations that you will give on the future fight against pandemics within your research project. Are there already any results that you would like to share with us? So what the outcome of your research is on how a state or how the European Union should deal with a similar situation in future?
Of course, I would really state that my one recommendation, which is already preliminary. All this what I will state is, of course, preliminary results, because I'm still in the process of research. But one already recommendation what I could really say, there are a few more I will say, is that if government claims that their restrictions or their permissions are based on scientific evidence, then they should mention it. And then at least, because if they say so, then they should really particularly make reference to what kind of scientific evidence they do refer to. If they say that this is political decision, or that this is decision like made by parliament or by government, then it is clear this is political decision, and we are treating that decision as political one. But what I would really say, as soon as someone mentions science, then it has to be very precise. Who exactly he is quoting, who exactly he is citing, and what kind of and also what is important, of course, to see whether this citation or reference has been cited correctly. Because as we know in science as well, sometimes we do see references where they are useless or they are even wrongly cited. So this is one recommendation, and I really would say that, because in the medical field in general, and it's not only COVID. We are now having another hot issue about regulation of women choosing to give birth at home. So scientific evidence really matters, and we have to use it. And particularly when it comes to clinical risks, we don't have any other way to discuss clinical risks, medical risks, if we don't have evidence. Every other discussion is just what I have seen myself, and that's it. So this is number one. I would really suggest that if any decision is based on science, it has to be clearly then stated what kind of science.
Good.
Then second, I would really say that we have to really look in all these measures, how do we really protect human rights? We should always consider that that these people we are really restricting, they are humans, because we have seen and a COVID pandemic really allowed us to get terrible examples how humans were not respected. For example, I wrote an article for Latvian Journal of Medical Doctors, and we had a restriction for women in birth. In deliveries, they had a restriction to have a partner accompanying them. And they relied on the law, which stated that any third party should not be permitted to enter hospital. This is, of course, wrong interpretation of law, because I would not consider as a lawyer that the partner for woman husband is a third party. Even I would say this is necessary. And of course, and there was a very good medical evidence, both by WHO and by, for example, British Society of Obstetricians, saying that it is for birth safety to secure that even women, having COVID, if that is possible, they should be accompanied by a support person, because this is a matter not about comfort, it's not about individual rights, it's a matter of medical safety, and it's a matter of humanity. So, and I would like really to say that this measure was clearly unacceptable. And then I have another example how to explain. Our hospitals in March, they introduced very strict restrictions to personal belongings in hospitals. We had the case when a mobile phone of COVID patient who unfortunately he died in hospital, and he was our colleague in university. His wife wrote afterwards that he was not permitted to use his mobile phone in intensive care unit. And this was obviously wrong way of treating patients with COVID, because there was there was not such restriction for medical personnel, and I was sure they all had their mobile phones. I even checked with some of them in their pockets, and there is no evidence that mobile phones are really risky. And there is, of course, good other examples from other countries that people who were isolated due to COVID, the hospitals provided them with different digital means to connect to their loved ones, to continue conversation, even to support them while dying. And this is what I say is that these two examples as well. But what I say is that what we learned there in our approach in hospitals, this was not necessary, and it was therefore contrary to the human rights. Yes, there are some measures which are reasonable, and I do believe, but we have, but the hospital particularly is run by medical doctors. There is full house of people having knowledge in medicine. And they have to be able to judge, to apply critical thinking and to judge and take decisions. But that is exactly, it was the case here as well in Latvia. Doctors were really afraid to do it. There was such fear in hospitals that now all will be infected, that they were really speaking like paralyzed. And that of course didn't help them, and patients were suffering out of this. And I would say, okay, when we see some big wave like early March coming, and we don't have really these ways to do, I do say, okay, we do prohibit, but the next day we have to start again, and we have to then consider how do we limit our prohibitions in a reasonable way.
Okay,
so,
I see. And there was a third?
And of course, another preliminary finding that I have already is that we do have different norms which are mistakenly written, and we were not fast enough to correct them.
Specific COVID-19 laws, you mean?
Exactly, yeah. Like what I learned, that this norm about self-isolation is so poorly written, and it is not. It is known in authorities. It was even yesterday. There is evidence in the information supplied together with amendments.
Yeah.
But they didn't dare to change the norm itself.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know whether this is of any help, but I may share with you the news that this is not only in Latvia the case, right? So I think it's a quite common problem everywhere.
But look, Nicholas, but this is again, in medical law, we have it a lot, but in general, all who we are doing something, we are doing mistakes. Yeah. This is very human. And we have to accept that we are doing mistakes. And in COVID times, we are. This was simply like it was possible to see much faster than we do it usually. But then we have to really be aware that how do we manage our mistakes? Yes. And in medical safety, we do manage mistakes by, first of all, apologizing to someone who suffered, and secondly, we do corrections.
Yes.
And that we have to do in law as well.
Yeah, quite similar in law, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Solvita, thank you so much. I think this was a wonderful overview about what you're doing and about the situation in Latvia, and about some of the fundamental issues we are dealing with in this pandemic. Is there anything you would like to add at the end?
I really thank you, Nicholas, for inviting me, and I really see, and I've been following you, Ars Boni videos, because this is what is so important, that we do keep connections, we do keep discussions, and I really learned from your questions again, something more for my research.
Thank you. It's very kind.
And I learned as well by online meetings with other colleagues that in order to develop thought, in order to develop ideas, we have to meet.
Yes, absolutely.
And in the case we are not able to meet in person as we were used to meet before, we have to use online meetings.
Yes.
And this is a really nice way. And another issue, what I would really, I'm thankful for you, and I would like to invite colleagues, that the evidence we have, the cases we have, they are not unique. But I believe that more value we will really get if we will combine our knowledge, our cases, and then if we will produce, let's say, articles, guidelines, or some already material with knowledge we gathered during this COVID times. And therefore, I'm really interested also to cooperate with colleagues in other countries, particularly in comparative research.
Yes.
Because Latvia is a very small country, and if you look at the scientific journals, they are not very interested to accept just description of Latvian situation. But doing comparative research and doing research together with people from other countries with a like outside view on our situations, we really get much better picture on the issue, and I believe that we can really then provide knowledge for both for us and for others as well. So that therefore I see very good value in these discussions, and thank you again, Nicholas, and your university that you are running this project. So
Thank you so much, Solvita, and you are completely right. I completely agree with you. We need to do a lot more of research together also in law, not only in medicine. That is one of the most important personal lessons I learned so far. Absolutely. Yeah.
I hope. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's start with it. Indeed. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, Solvita. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you to all our listeners. It was really great to have you with us. Stay healthy, stay safe, and stay interested in what we are doing. Thank you so much, and all the best. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.